What did Yosef think was going to happen? Remember the story. Yosef, still under the guise of being the viceroy of Egypt, has met with his brothers after they have come down to buy grain in Egypt, like everybody else has. They've all had to come to Yosef. And Yosef has been lying in wait for them and attempting to see if they are the same brothers who still harbor hatred for him, or maybe they have changed, or maybe Yosef doesn't even consider that to be a possibility. Remember, when they first arrive, he immediately notices that his only full brother, Binyamin, is not with them. So he could make the very simple calculation, well, maybe they killed him too, or sold him as a slave. And then when they find out that Binyamin is still with their elderly father back in Canaan, Yosef can make the easy deduction, well, why hasn't he been sent along? And as the brothers say, because his father is concerned. Well, concerned why? Maybe the brothers' hatred for Binyamin is similar to the hatred that they had for Yosef. And so Yosef sends them on this yo-yo back and forth and insists that they bring Binyamin. And as last week's Parsha concluded, he had planted his personal goblet in Binyamin's pack. And when the brothers got outside of Egypt, the posse rode up. And when they discovered the stolen goods, dragged them all back down to Egypt, they all said to Yosef, we are all your slaves. We will all stay here. And Yosef said, what? God forbid. Why would I allow that? The guilty one will stay here and be my slave forever, and the rest of you are free to go. And that's the great dramatic moment that Torah leaves us off with last week's Parsha and continues with this week's Parsha. Now we know what in fact happens, that Yehuda confronts Yosef and insists that he will stay. And then Yosef says, I am Yosef. Surprise, is my father still alive? But let's analyze from perhaps a different perspective. What did Yosef anticipate would happen? It certainly seems like he's caught off guard, like this wasn't the plan. He's overwhelmed with emotion. Maybe Yosef thought that the brothers would in fact abandon Binyamin. And maybe Yosef's plan was, well, the brothers will back to Canaan. Yosef knows that there's 5 more years of famine left. And so he will at least be able to save Binyamin. As soon as the brothers will leave, Yosef will identify himself to his brother Binyamin, and the rest of them will be to them as was to the abandoned brothers of previous generations, to Esav, to Yishmael, to Nachor. That will continue on that pattern, but at least now we'll have 2. It won't only be 1. And when Yehuda confronts Yosef, everything is suddenly turned upside down. What, though, is going on beyond just in this momentary experience between 2 brothers who once quarreled, one who once sold his brother off as a slave, who is now standing up for and defending his brother? Chassidus explains to us that Yosef and Yehuda represent more than just their 2 individuals under a specific circumstance. Yosef represents and is the model of the Jew in exile. He has come down to Egypt. He has brought godliness down into Egypt. He has compelled the Egyptians to curtail their lustful behavior through bris milah. He has brought out that even the Pharaoh acknowledges that is the wisdom of God. Yosef represents the capacity of a Jew to bring godliness into a circumstance that is naturally antagonistic to it, to bring holiness into exile. Yehuda, ata yeducha ya achicha. Your brothers will come to acknowledge you. You are the man of gratitude. You are the one who elevates, who lifts up. Ultimately, from Yehuda will come the kings, King David, Shlomo HaMelech, and ultimately, of course, Mashiach, who will elevate the godliness from within. So Yosef represents that characteristic of the yesh, of the true existence of Hashem, being brought down into the falsity, into the ayin of this physical world. Whereas Yehuda represents that level of yesh, of self-awareness, being elevated to the true naught, the true bittul, the true surrender of any existence of Hashem himself. And so Yosef seems to be calling the shots. He's got his brothers running back and forth. He's got them on this yo-yo ride. And he's saying that this is the way in which we will make the world a more godly place, by imposing godliness onto the world. And it is only in this moment of drama that Yehuda steps forward and says, no, no, no. Yosef, Your message is an important one, yet it is a temporary one. For as we know, spoiler alert, that the Jews in Egypt is not going to be good for very long, because eventually the impurity, the exile of Egypt, will enslave the Jewish people. Yehuda's manner to transform this physical world from its bloated sense of self-awareness into a servant of the infinity of Hashem via the characteristic of gratitude. This is, in fact, the long-term process through which the Jewish people will, in fact, achieve their objective. So while Yosef babysits us through exile, it is Yehuda, it is David HaMelech, Shlomo HaMelech, and of course, ultimately Mashiach, who will, in fact, fulfill the ultimate purpose for which Hashem has created the world. Regards from quarantine. Have a beautiful Shabbos.